Hi, my TED Talk title is Rethinking the First Prescription, and this is my take on how early antibiotics might quietly shape our child's brain. So, have you ever had given your child antibiotics? I have personally. When my child was just about 2 months old, he was rushed to the hospital with a UTI and he ended up staying for about 2 days. During this time, he was given around the clock two antibiotics. They were both in the penicillin family, I think ampicillin and another one. And at the time, I was terrified because some of the reactions he was having was a little scary, like diarrhea, chills, and rashes. But we saw that the medicine was working because it rapidly started bringing his fever down. But months later, I started to wonder what else could those antibiotics have done that I could not see. So we usually think of the gut as a place where food is just digest, but it's way more than that. It's actually home to trillions of tiny microbes, and those are limited to bacteria, fungi, and often more. And we call this the gut microbiome. See, these microbes, they do help with digestion, but they also are tiny messengers that send signals from the brain to the gut or from the gut to the brain. So this helps shape our immune system and regulate stress and often memory. And this starts very young, even before birth. So there's a few ways. One way is the major nerve called the vagus nerve. This is actually like a direct hotline between the gut and the brain. Then there's chemical messengers like serotonin and dopamine. This is known as the brain's hormone, but actually 90% is made right here in our gut of serotonin. And lastly, the gut helps train up the immune system. So, from the moment babies are born, they start building this inner world. And inside this world, it grows depending on the things that the baby is exposed to. So, one is how was the baby born, vaginally or via C section? So, my son, he was born via C section. And I realized that he missed out on those first microbes that the baby would receive when exiting the birth canal. So, this led to me to try something called breastfeeding. Offering breast milk was a great alternative to formula because it did give the baby back some of those nutrients and gut bacteria that formula doesn't do quite as well. And even things like letting your baby crawl on the floor, having a pet, toys, pacifiers, this also can add to the mix. And I like to call these things the baby's first medicine because it does implant those good bacteria. And antibiotics sometimes cannot target the good and bad bacteria. They're not really selective. So that brings me to my next point. And so I like to think of the baby's gut as a brand new garden. So when you're putting those seeds and expecting the baby to grow and the body to mature and the gut to mature, we have to be careful. So when we give the baby antibiotics, like I said, that can disrupt everything like a storm wrenching that garden. Their job is to kill harmful bacteria, but sometimes they will also wipe out the good bacteria and also increases the gut's permeability to other harmful pathogens. And I say this because after my son's first hospital visit, things did not get easier. He was more permeable to things like RSV, the flu, COVID. He had some of those things simultaneously and multiple times. And I kept thinking, why does my little baby keep getting sick and struggling to get better? And that's when I learned that the gut microbiome doesn't just help with digestion, but it trains that immune system. So those early antibiotics, I'm not saying that it did, but it could have had a big impact in how his immune system functions. Even to today, he's 16 months old. And I know most people wouldn't connect antibiotics with things like speech delay, behavior issues, recurrent ear infections. But some research I've looked at started making those connections. And some studies show that babies who had fewer kinds of certain helpful bacteria were the ones found in healthy guts. They scored lower for tests on language and cognitive skills at just 2 years old. Another study showed when those key microbes were missing that there were changes in the brain's chemical processing. And so we talked about how antibiotics affects the growing gut, but whenever we use antibiotics unnecessarily, we lead to something big called antimicrobial resistance. And this is a future issue. It's happening right now all over the world, actually. So according to the World Health Organization, it is actually responsible for 1.27 million deaths globally in 2019. And so this means that simple decisions like prescribing antibiotics when a child may not need antibiotics can lead to a bigger global issue. And I'm not saying we should stop giving antibiotics altogether. They save lives, including my son's, but maybe we need to use them more intentionally. So we should ask our doctor, do we really need this right now? Can we wait and see? Or, just wait for further testing to see whether the infection is viral or bacterial. If antibiotics are necessary, they will give them ways to support the gut after treatment, like probiotics. So once again, I'm not trying to scare parents. I'm a parent myself, but I'm just saying what we give our children early on, their food, their medicine, their care, it builds the foundation for who they are today. And my question is, how can we make smarter choices with antibiotics, especially when the smallest bodies have the most to lose? See you later. Here are my references. Oops.